welcome to this talk. It's called Befriending the Enemy. And I start. So, hi, I hope you all are good. My name is Laura and I'm a professional dragon. This means that my job involves work from too many areas to pinpoint a specific title. I'm currently heading Valiant Game Studio as a co-founder with Anna Henelius by day, and exercise my indie dev creative skills by night. Some of my work involves Sweden Game Arena and this conference, and that is how many of you know me. I immerse myself in games since I was little. After writing about them, and especially about how to make them, as a freelance games journalist for over a decade, I decided to turn this into a career, and this took me far away from the place of my birth. I started as a producer for Fun Labs Activision in Bucharest, then headed to Milan and worked with Milestone, and finally I moved to Sweden and got to work with and befriend a lot of fantastic game developers. I guess my non-common life experience shaped my expectations from games as well. I enjoy an adrenaline-packed challenge like anyone, but I get quite a lot of adrenaline from my normal adult life. I also look around and often find myself dreaming about the kind of world I want to live in. And I am sick of all the media around me portraying doomsday scenarios, dystopian futures, and a divided society, often portrayed in very, very strange ways. I really crave entertainment experiences that relax me and help me dream about better futures. So I kind of hope to get this relaxation and optimism from games. But those are feelings that are pretty hard to get these days from mainstream media in general and from games in particular. Way too often, games make me feel bad. They make me imagine killing. They make me angry or like a loser if I play badly. Or worse, they make me make other people feel bad if I or my team wins. Games rarely allow me to be the kind of person I want to be. I don't really want to be a killer, no matter how nicely that's framed. I don't get such a high kick from winning. What I want instead is to enjoy the northern lights in Skyrim, or a quiet night fishing in Darkshore, or just imagining being in the nature, which is what Firewatch gave me. I love to have my eyes open towards cultures and people that I don't understand so well, so I really enjoy experiences that use the power of games to give me that, like Never Alone. I appreciate games like This War of Mine, which present war from a different perspective, and wildly imaginative, playful worlds like the one in Journey, which gave me a sense of extreme bliss. And I really want to experience living in worlds that are better than this one. And since there aren't that many relaxing, profound, meaningful games out there, and since I am, after all, a game developer, I try to put myself in positions where I can help build these kind of worlds and experiences. By day, I do my best to help Anna and our talented artist Eva Sokolova build a fantasy take of the 1920s, where you play an old dwarven lady who still mourns the loss of her wife, and where you experience a world in which goblins fight for their rights to vote, orcs and dwarves are seen as second-hand citizens, and where interracial and gay couples are terribly frowned upon. By evening, I work alongside Brie Code and a team of amazingly talented people to turn the smartphone into a tool that can be a friend and a safe space instead of a source of stress and hopelessness. And by night, and terribly slowly, I create a utopian world that is on the brink of shedding its borders, and you can speed this process up. Now, this talk is about SJW, which stands for Social Justice Warrior. This became a pretty common term in this video game subculture, thanks to the Gamergate movement, but I want to take a moment to clarify what it means. A social justice warrior is an individual who promotes socially progressive views such as feminism, civil rights, multiculturalism, and identity politics. This is not a bad thing, right? In fact, in the early 90s, it was a positive term used as a compliment for art such as music that promoted justice on a society level. But in 2011, someone used it as an insult on Twitter, and later on, it became the flagship insult used by Gamergate. In their eyes, a social justice warrior is a dishonest person that uses social justice subjects for personal validation and for promoting selfish agendas. SGW is double standard and angry identity politics and propaganda. According to Urban Dictionary, a social justice warrior is a person who uses the fight for civil rights as an excuse to be rude, condescending, and sometimes violent for the purposes of relieving their frustrations or validating their sense of unwarranted superiority. An individual that is defined by their constant attacking or addressing of anything they find inappropriate, offensive, or triggering in their eyes. And my favorite definition? A mini-Stalinist who thinks they are the moral guardian of society, except for the fact that they were never elected for the job. And I can go on. The point is, social justice warrior is now a pejorative term. And it's very often used in association with games that have strong women protagonists, that include stories about LGBT characters and relationships, and in general about any underrepresented group that tackles subjects such as feminism, immigration, or activism. And here are some examples. Here are some games that have been called SJW. Battlefield 5 for including women. Horizon for its portrayal of a society where power belongs to strong ladies. Life is Strange and Gone Home for the sexual orientation of its characters. And some famous real people who have been called SJWs are Anita Sarkeesian for her work with Feminist Frequency, Lee Alexander for her progressive articles and especially for her "Gamers don't have to be your audience, gamers are over" piece, or Rami Ismail for his tireless effort to include the entire world and not just the US and Western Europe in the incredibly creative process of making games. Yet in my eyes, if anyone should be called a social justice warrior, a person who challenges the establishment and takes the fight for a better, more just world in their own hands, here are some fictional examples. Luke Skywalker from Star Wars, Batman, Altair and Desmond Miles from Assassin's Creed, The Witcher. Every creative work reflects the belief and worldviews of its creators. So in a sense, every game is political, has an agenda, and a special way to depict the world. Why else are we so often placed in the role of the chosen one, who must save imaginary worlds from something bad? Sometimes it's monsters, sometimes it's a great evil, and sometimes it's a system. But there are conventional ways to do this and unconventional ways as well. Unconventional games stand a greater chance to be called SJW propaganda. And since the popular belief is that reception makes or breaks the success of a title, getting this kind of reception can be seen as dangerous, devastating, ruinous, or worse. So making SJW games is bad, and in some cases even dangerous. And so it's safer to stay away from politically charged subjects, characters that portray minorities, or in general any serious subject that challenges the elusive idea of fun. This is a notion that is overwhelmingly prevalent in all facets of our industry, and it impacts many other aspects than just those that involve public reception. For example, non-conventional games or games with controversial aspects have troubles finding investment or publishers. People stray away from titles that are difficult to market or hard to sell. So should you make them? What can you expect from when making non-conventional controversial games? Is it really that bad to have your game associated with the notion of SJW? And how can you react if that happens? The games I'm currently involved in have all been controversial. 2 of them earned the SJW label, and the third one encountered extreme skepticism from within the industry. I'd like to expand a bit on each of them and tell you about the reception we got and how we handled it. And then I'd like to conclude with some very personal observations related to making controversial and non-conventional games and handling the feedback. Hardpiper's Border my Night project, is an optimistic strategy game about traveling, freedom, and changing the world. Disclaimer, this is a work in progress game and not everything I will describe is developed yet. It's coming. The fictional world of Heart, which, as you can see, is actually a heart, but it's also an anagram of Earth, is a pretty nice place to be in. It's a colorful retro-futuristic world inspired by the Jetsons and by NASA's Visions of the Future posters, where the lifespan is 150 years and everyone has access to some degree of universal basic income, based on the country you are born in. Much like Earth, Heart is divided in countries, 26 of them, to be precise, and 25 of them are inspired by real-life countries. You can easily spot the real-life inspiration if you like anagrams as much as I do. But the thing with this planet is, it's definitely heading towards shedding all its borders, visas, and bureaucracy that comes with it. Heart will become a borderless world in about 250 years, but you can speed up the process. And the win condition of this game is whether you can live to experience a completely borderless planet Earth in your lifetime. You do that by traveling and writing about your experiences. You start the game by filling in your passport, also known as creating your character, and the citizenship you choose doubles down as a difficulty level. The more you travel, the more you can write about your experiences through a minigame that uses hashtags and mimics a blog. You discover or loot these hashtags in the landmarks that you visit, and the quality of the hashtags you get increases with the amount of time you spend in one place. Publishing blog posts gains you followers, which gets you influence, which then impacts the openness of the countries that you visit next. Hard Paper's Border is currently on early access on Steam. The development is excruciatingly slow, sorry, and it is far from finished. But one of the first labels it got was SJW Simulator. And I have been called a hypocrite because I work for Sweden Game Arena. That didn't feel so good, especially because I make extra efforts to be aware and analyze my biases. What felt good is the response the label gathered. And those responses shaped a very interesting conversation about borders, immigrants, visas, and politics, which is exactly what I hope to inspire in the first place. Pendula Swing, my day game, is a point-and-click adventure game set in a fantasy version of the American Roaring 1920s. Our tagline is Tolkien meets the Great Gatsby, and we are building a glamorous world inhabited by fantasy races such as elves, orcs, goblins, dwarves, and the not-so-fantasy but omnipresent humans. On the surface, the inspiration can be interpreted as purely aesthetic. We love Art Deco, swing music, and fashion, and the dawn of the automobile industry. But in truth, it's far more than that. As PC Gamer so eloquently put it, between prohibition, women's suffrage, the dawn of the automobile, and the rise of jazz, America's roaring 20s were a time of great change. They were also a time of great prejudice. Adventure game Pendula Swing taps into this tumultuous environment and reframes it using fantasy races. During the 1920s, besides a frantic economic boom and the large-scale adaptation of the automobile, telephone, radio, motion pictures, and electricity at home, we also saw the women's suffrage movement, the rise of fascism and communism, the prohibition of alcohol, and the peak of the KKK movement. Pendula Swing's aim is to illustrate all this using fantasy tropes. And in addition to that, our protagonist, Brialine, is an old dwarven lady who still mourns the death of her wife, and we have several interracial gay couples whose story you can follow and influence if you wish. Sure enough, one of the first negative reviews we got was another piece of SJW propaganda. The first thing we learn about the protagonist is that she's a hard God of Steam's profanity filters. And the first NPCs we met tell us that his wife is a goblin, that humans and goblins can't have children, and that backward oppressive society disapproves of their marriage. However, these kind of reviews generated comments like this. Beep you anti-SJW vanilla beep dweeps, you're more annoying than the worst SJW. Anything that has a non-white or female character is SJW to you neckbeards. I wasn't even going to buy this game, but I'm going to buy it now thanks to you. Stop trying to censor video games. And finally, self-care. Brie codes project that I contribute to in some of my evenings, alongside a team of amazingly creative people. Self-care is the one example in this talk that was not called an SJW hard game. Instead, the challenge it faced was the skepticism of the industry, who did not understand the point. This skepticism prevented us from finding support from publishers and investors within the industry, but it has a surprising effect for us as a team. It made us redefine our idea of what a game is. For a long time in the development process, we were all calling self-care a game. But this experience has no score, no difficulty, and no notion of winning or failure. And so when Brie talked about it in the industry, game professionals were left puzzled. After trying the app, they kept coming back to us with advice such as add more difficulty, add levels or a life bar, add notifications or achievements or the ability to fail. And sometimes we ourselves were caught in our own solidified lessons about what a game is, until we started talking about the fact that self-care should not be called a game. And Brie got a fantastic inspiration to rename it as a companion. A companion is a friend who is there for you, and self-care is a space where you feel safe and relaxed, where it's okay to stay in bed all day, and where you are offered multiple opportunities to reflect, meditate, and take care of yourself. Self-care was never associated with social justice, even though I believe it might be the most revolutionary project I am involved in. Why? Matt Haig, a writer, says it pretty well in the book Reasons to Stay Alive. The world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't very good for economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? To be calm becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence, to be comfortable with your messy human selves, would not be good for business. But last night, while many of you were bowling, I was talking to Brie, trying to better pinpoint the idea of revolution involved in the art of making self-care. We both believe that making something of value is not an antithesis to good business. Quite the contrary. And so I'd like to offer another quote from Richard St. John, an analyst who interviewed over 1,000 very well-known people like Bill Gates, Martha Stewart, the Google founders, Rupert Murdoch, Jane Goodall, and many Nobel Prize winners, in an effort to define what really leads to success. In his TED Talk called 8 Secrets of Success, he said, "A lot of kids want to be millionaires. The first thing I say is, okay, well, you can't serve yourself. You've got to serve others, something of value, because that's the way people really get rich." So that is my experience with SJW. And the conclusions I have drawn are very personal. Many developers have different reactions and responses to this kind of feedback, so I really want to stress the importance of finding your way to deal with this, if you want to make non-conventional games. Almost any feedback is good feedback. Attacks of any kind are excluded from this statement because a personal attack towards the developers is not feedback. This being said, what I fear the most is silence. I want to tell you about something called the 1% rule, also known as the lurker rule. In most online communities, user participation often follows a 99-1 rule. This means that 90% of the users are lurkers who read or observe but don't contribute. 9% of users contribute from time to time, but other priorities dominate their time. And 1% of users participate a lot and account for almost all the action. For example, Wikipedia. Currently, the free encyclopedia features more than 5.5 million articles, but only about 70,000 contributors. That's 0.2%. And about 0.003% of those are the ones who contributed to almost 2/3 of the entire content. The Bularca rule can be applied to Steam. And when Steam Spy went down thanks to the changes Valve did to the Steam user profiles, which are now by default private, Jake Birkett from Grey Alien shared his method to estimate sales. And his method is based on Steam reviews. According to Birkett, you get an average of 82 sales per review. So if you have 10 reviews, you can pretty safely estimate that you will have 820 sales. When we talk about averages, of course, they factor in both huge sellers and games that barely sell. So this factor can vary between 30 to 150. In any case, one review carries at least a handful of sales. Birkett also looked at how the score factors in, and it has a very small impact. In other words, even negative reviews are beneficial for sales. The idea is that the game is strong enough to earn the effort of leaving any kind of feedback. I have tested this with my games, and these numbers hold true. So, if even angry reviews are good, how can you not be kind? Most people change their attitude if you respond with kindness to their anger. If people react, it is because they want to be heard, and the wise response is to learn what really disturbed them. Almost always, if you ask kindly, you will get a lot of more super valuable feedback than just the original angry rant. My way to react to SJW comment is this: don't attack. That's just the way I am, but it's also a well-researched, great response to anger. Show you care. Because I really do care to understand where that person is coming from so I can improve my projects. Make yourself human, because way too often we dissociate companies and games from the people who actually make them, and the industry is in dire need of more humanizing and transparency. And lighten the mood. We can certainly at least try to have a good debate without anger. It doesn't always work, but in my case, it almost always did. Even if you don't manage to have a productive debate with the person who calls your game an SJW propaganda, for every hater, there is at least one lover. I am most certainly not the only utopian optimist who embraces the fact that people are wonderfully diverse, that just like there is no one way to make a good game, there isn't any one way to have a relationship either, that today's world is facing many problems with no easy solutions, and so on. And especially when knowing how rarely people do participate in online communities, it's just so motivating to see strangers making an effort to support reason and debate on your behalf. Finally, I feel that in a world full of entertainment content, not just games, but also movies and books and music, it isn't that wise to follow the crowd and create experiences too similar to what already exists on the market. Instead, I do believe this is an amazing time to analyze your voice, your hopes, your dreams, and use this to nudge the world towards your desired future. This is a great time to tell controversial stories and offer non-conventional experiences. There are so many people who never felt themselves represented in games. Why don't we represent them? Games are so praised for creativity and imagination, so why do we limit the personas we can play as in games to a handful of straight, white, young-looking options? There are so many things happening around us. Why don't we use and abuse the power of games to understand what climate change, immigration, inequality truly means? And please, 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 give relaxation and optimism a chance. Is it truly so boring to imagine utopia? Things went pretty nicely for us when we collectively imagine we can put a man on the moon. So why can't we have more of those kind of dreams portrayed using tools as immersive, creative, and inspiring as games? That's it. I think there is some time for questions, but I'm not sure how much. Um, uh, if you don't have any questions, then enjoy. Oh, you do.
So the commentary you mentioned, the rather censored commentary, and the response to that, essentially, I'm going to buy the game now because I want to support that which you hate. Do you see that as a wider trend, that people start supporting games out of perhaps political motive rather than entertainment preference?
Yes, but I'm an optimist. I am an optimist, and I do see in the bubble of, especially in this industry, a lot more people supporting bold, different kind of initiatives. And that is why, Bury Me My Love happened, Orwell happened, and I can go on. So definitely, there is more support. Yep.
Yeah, so most of the games that you showed are really interesting concepts. But when you look at like top tier AAA games, you can't basically get by describing the gameplay without the word combat. Like there's some sort of physical conflict always. Do you see like a AAA game without combat with these kinds of mechanics arriving to the market anytime soon?
Yes. And why? Bree's experience comes from AAA, and she left Ubisoft for a reason. There are a lot of developers working in AAA right now who are, we are talking exactly about this kind of experiences that we crave in games. Some days ago, I launched a hashtag on Twitter, which is called Relaxing Games. And it's both relaxing games, in the sense that games that are relaxing, but also relax in games and moments of relaxations that you have had in games. And there's a lot of people and many AAA developers who got back with a lot of examples. Oh yeah, I also fished in Dark Shore and it was lovely. I also like to watch the Northern Lights in Skyrim. And there's a lot who wants to create that. And eventually, you know what happens when a big studio like Telltale dies? There's always a chance that a part of the team will go and form another studio. And those are the AAA studios of tomorrow. That's what I think.
Why do you think people who react negatively to games such as like Horizon, where it's a female protagonist, why do they get so angry for something so small that the main character is a woman?
I really don't know. I think about this a lot, and I wonder why, like, everyone's theory about that, but I do believe that it's a sense of entitlement that has been heavily promoted by the industry. We did this. We nurtured this kind of culture for so many years. And it's also a profound lack of transparency and clarity when it comes to what it means to make games. And it became easier from some aspects to start to become a game developer. But that doesn't mean that making games is easy. And the media often portrays making games as easy and gives very rare examples of the one-man team that did this huge success. And this doesn't help. This really doesn't help either. And if you carry some of those comments and you push and ask, like, why are you so angry? What made you do this? And you start to have a conversation with that person. I've heard a lot of cases where people didn't, like, the conversation turned into a very revelatory debate about what it means to make games, and everyone was like, oh, I didn't know, I'm sorry, I didn't imagine that there's actually a soul there that, I'm hurting with this, yeah.
Do you find it's worthwhile to engage with people who say, for instance, feminism is cancer?
Personally, I do, but then again, I am an optimist. But I don't think this is one way to respond to think. I think people respond in their own way, and it's very good to know what your own way of response is. And sometimes, perhaps it's wiser not to engage with them, depending of the level of angriness and of the comment, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think? Because you must have had experiences like that also.
Never.
Oh.
But that's just personal.
Okay. I think we're done. Thank you.